Hello, everyone. Welcome to Avaya's Healthy Aging Curriculum. I am Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of Avaya University. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Dr. Daniel Pompa, is here today to talk with us about Beyond Fasting, 2 ultimate biohacks for anti-aging and longevity. Dr. Pompa is a respected leader in the health and wellness space, educating practitioners and the public on the origins of inflammation-driven disease, the therapeutic application of the ketogenic diet, fasting, ancestral-based health approaches, cellular healing, and detoxification. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, I love this topic. Can't wait.
Awesome. So I know a lot of people, when we talk about aging, they might think things like, well, hormonal issues, autoimmune conditions, brain fog, lack of energy are all just part of the normal aging process. So what do you think?
Yeah, baloney. It may be common, but it's not normal, right? My story. I got to 1999. I started getting very sick, and it kind of went for 4 or 5 years of that. And I had every symptom. I was a lot younger then. Obviously, I'm 54 today, and I can say I'm healthier today than even when I was in my 30s, even before I got sick. But my sickness led to everything that I teach, and I teach and train doctors around the world these concepts that we'll pull out in this lecture today.
Excellent. So could you, share a little bit about your background? Like what did you get sick with and how did that obviously influence?
Yeah, I didn't know. I just started with like the lack of energy. I thought it was overtraining. I was training for cycle races at the time. And I backed off my training. Now I was getting worse. I started getting headaches, started getting major fatigue. Then I got insomnia. And then I became allergic to every food I was eating. Out of nowhere. So like most, I was just kind of chasing it around, but my symptoms were getting much worse and bizarre things, right? I couldn't sound sensitive. I couldn't adapt to any stress. I realized my thyroid, my adrenals were shot, even though my blood tests were normal. That was frustrating. But my hair was thinning, right? I was getting like losing muscle, gaining fat. All these metabolic changes. And I just really didn't know what was wrong. I was getting to the point where I didn't have enough energy to work because I was insomnia massive. I couldn't either get to sleep or I'd wake up in the middle of the night, couldn't get back to sleep with anxiety, horrible. Just to fast forward, I went through a lot of trying to fix the downstream stuff, the thyroid, the adrenals, but it wasn't working. And then I realized it's something in the brain, the pituitary, that controls my hormones. But I didn't know what was wrong there. I just realized pituitary hypothalamus. Then I found Mad Hatter's disease online. I don't know if you remember what that is, but people making felt hats were using mercury. It was part of the process, but they were known as Mad Hatters. I was mad as a hatter. I had all these symptoms. So I did a blood test, but it was normal. It was like a year or so later. And I was working with a very bright endocrinologist, trying to figure out my thyroid issues and adrenal issues. And he said, I think you have mercury toxicity. And I said, I thought so too. I took a blood test. He said, wrong test. If that was if you had had acute, meaning every day getting exposed, like the people making felt hats, right? The Mad Hatters. It's probably more chronic, which you need to challenge it out of your tissue. And then, it will show if it's a problem. And that test actually did show. So then I said, well, where did I get this mercury from? And he said, did you have any dental work done around the time this started? And I looked back at my cycling journal where I was training. And sure enough, it was just days after. That's when at least the fatigue started. So then I realized, okay, these silver fillings that I had 2 removed that day in the dental chair, I still had about 6 or 8 in my mouth, but they contained 50% mercury. So that sent me on this search to figure out how safely to get the mercury or the rest of the fillings out, because I didn't want to repeat that, how to do that safely, and then how to get it out of my brain, because that's where studies show that it does in fact accumulate, which drove all my hormone problems, right? So out of all that, I teach how to do this process, right? Real detox is at the cellular level. And that's what I learned, because when I went and started researching, and I'm a very good researcher, I realized, oh my gosh, detox is so absolutely done. There's all these contradictions online, all this garbage out there. And it was really all that to why I'm passionate about teaching the right way to detox, clear your brain, and, deal with these issues.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you for sharing a bit about your story. So we know why you got into the work that you do today. So I guess let's talk about that. Like how do you teach people to detox, and what is that kind of process?
Yeah, I mean, I made the comment that real detox has to be at the cell. And what I mean by that is if you go online, right, this cleanse, the juice cleanse, colon cleanse, liver cleanse, all of those are too far downstream to matter, meaning you have to get to the cell, upregulate what the cell has to do every day, and that's get rid of toxins. When that stops happening, that's when you get sick. That's when you trigger genes, thyroid conditions, obesity, weight loss resistance. I mean, I can go down a list, but it's the cell being toxic that's the problem. Now it doesn't even hear your hormones. So it doesn't even matter if you take them. It doesn't hear hormones. You don't feel good. So to get well, my saying is to get well, you have to fix the cell, but ultimately you have to detox the cell. So colon cleanses, those things. I don't have a problem with those things. I mean, I call them poopers because, that's what they do. But people go, oh, I have a result, right? I'm going to the bathroom. So in our minds, that's detox. In some aspects it is. And again, I'm not against those things, but I did plenty of that. It didn't fix me. What you'd have to do is get the cell working. When you make energy in your cell, so you feel normal, you actually make waste. It's like burning a fire, right? You burn wood, you make smoke. If you do that in your home without a chimney or a damper open, you die. So that's what's happening in your cells. You're burning, you're making energy, you're making a waste, and your cell has to get rid of that. And then when the cell's already holding on to toxins that you're exposed to from the outside in, now you have a problem. So upregulating that's the cell detox pathways is what I call cellular detox. And that's what I teach, right? But, there's a lot there. I have what I call my 5 R's as a roadmap of how I teach doctors to do that process. The 5 R's really are about upregulating these cell functions. And when you do that, you get your life back, right? So that's just in a nutshell of what I teach and why. Now, again, there's 3 phases of that. There's a prep phase, where you just prepare your cells and downstream detox pathways like your liver, your kidney, your gut, open those up while we get the cell doing what it should do. And then we go into a body phase where we just get the easy to clear stuff. And then the most important phase of all is the brain phase. That's the phase that changed my life and thousands of others now. So you have to get it out of the brain. You have to get it out of the nerve tissue. That's the key. And that has to be done correctly.
And what's the timeline on this process?
I love the saying, it's years, not months. When I work with a client, I don't have a brick and mortar practice anymore. I coach clients from around the world this process. My goal is to teach them this process so they can actually do it long enough to matter, because I pulled Mercury out of my brain. I did brain phases, and you have to understand, it's like you kind of do it for 3 or 4 days. You take a break, 3 or 4 days, take a break. I did that consistently for 2 years, a little more random for 4 years, just to get the Mercury out. And so therefore, people have to learn the process, because you don't need treatments. Most people watching this go, those are my problems. Treatments will fail you. You have to learn the process to actually do this. And that's my passion, is getting people, even if it's a regular person who's struggling, getting them to understand this. And then they can do it themselves. And therein lies the solution, and the power. Because, if you do, you have to understand this is a really important point. It took years for this stuff to accumulate in me and in you watching. Meaning that when you look at studies, the one called the DRASH study, that's a study where they realized the number of silver fillings like I had that contained 50% mercury in a mom's mouth was proportional to how much they found in the baby's brain. Now that was on autopsy studies, so pretty darn accurate, where they're biopsying and looking at how it accumulated, and they realized there was an exact, proportion to how many fillings and how much mercury. So that's where it starts, and then we get exposed throughout our life, adding to that brain mercury. So we have to get it out of those deep tissues.
Are all metal fillings, were they all mercury when they were still doing that technology? Is that?
Yeah, because a metal filling is an amalgam filling, right? You don't put metal in a mouth. Now you could have other crowns that have metal around them, which by the way, creates a new problem because when you have a silver filling, which is an amalgam that's just 50% mercury, and then let's say you have another metal in your mouth, whether it's an implant or a crown with metal around it, who knows? Maybe it's a brace or a retainer. But now we have opposing metals. We have two different metals, the amalgam, the metal's there, and then the other metal. That is a battery effect. So a battery has two metals in an acid. Okay, that's a battery. Two metals, two opposing metals, and an acid. Now what happens is galvanism, which makes the mercury come out of your fillings 10 times faster than normal, and it creates a charge that your brain feels. I had that going on because when they took out the two darn fillings, they put gold in, which was a better material, but now I still had silver fillings with mercury, and I had this galvanism. I remember when they got rid of the gold, it like just took that current away, and a lot of my anxiety actually diminished after that. Wow. So a lot of problems when you have opposing metals.
I feel like I should open my mouth right now and see if I have any left. I think they're all gone now, but
mine are gone.
Like I know when I was like, I think like early 20s, I'm pretty sure all probably similar process. I think I have had them all whatever removed or whatever they did back then to make them not
well, here's the problem too. First of all, people get them out and they go, oh, I got my fillings out. The problem is the vapor crosses the blood-brain barrier, and a lot of it ends up in the pituitary hypothalamus, which runs your hormones, right? That's why you can't fix your hormones. And then a lot of it gets in the pineal gland, which disrupts sleep, and so does the pituitary mercury. But the problem is that even though the fillings are gone, that mercury transformed into something called inorganic mercury. In there, it's trapped unless you do the right protocol to actually remove it. This is a huge problem because we all grew up in the generation where our parents had this. And by the way, in 4 generations, it's estimated to affect. Oh, and then you add the lead. My generation grew up in the lead generation. So did my parents. 4 generations you inherit lead from your mom. The number one source of lead is mom. And they give it in utero. When you're pregnant, you actually lose bone. It's normal. But lead is stored in the bones. And out comes lead during pregnancy in utero to the baby. So you have fillings, giving baby mercury there, and losing bone during pregnancy, giving lead to baby. Well, my wife, super high lead levels, which disrupted her hormones, which we couldn't figure out, etc. And we realized her mother had super high lead level, which led to her cancer and her hormone problems, which led to her cancer. My wife was heading down that same road. And then we realized her lead was off the chart because of her mother. Oh, it went further in my family. All 7 of us there. Now, this is from years ago. These kids are actually 23. He's 21, you can see. But I use this here for a reason. But anyways, so these are my 3 biological children. Okay, so that's the youngest, my oldest, and middle. So these 3 all got her lead. She had, as a baby, all these gastrointestinal issues. Didn't know it was wrong. Diarrhea, constipation. This one was called the Banshee because he just screamed. And we, after figuring out her lead was high and knowing it gets transferred, we measured their lead and it was off the chart. They got it from her. She got it from her mother, who's not in the picture. 4 generations.
Wow.
So, and they inherited her mercury as well because she had fillings with them. So all of my children actually went through this process of cellular detox. And I have to say this, these 2 we adopted, they lost their parents tragically. And Dylan, you can see he wasn't right here, but he was on the autism spectrum. He was vaccine damaged. If you met Dylan today, he works for my company. So cellular detox saved my life, my wife's, these ones from lead. And he had obviously extreme mercury levels. Now, my daughter, her toxicity issues didn't manifest until as a teenager, which is very common. Boys, autism 5-to-1. Testosterone has an amplifying effect, especially on mercury. Girls, estrogen actually gives them protection, but they seem to fall apart later. That was her case. So cellular detox saved her life too, but she's in chiropractic school now. She's
Awesome.
in her, she just finished her first year. But I guess, that passion of mine, my family was obviously very affected by this, but my passion is teaching more doctors to do this right, and more people, right? I still take clients on myself because it's done incorrectly. You don't take chlorella, cilantro, the 10-day cleanse, the poopers, and think that you're going to get rid of this problem. It's locked. And there is a process, upregulating cell function, using real binders and chelators correctly to get this stuff completely out of the body.
Is this something that right, are we all faced with this at some point in our life, and to some degree more than others, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, genetically, I definitely have weak pathways to get rid of the stuff, but don't be fooled. It affects everybody. It's a matter of, when. I always like to draw a picture of a bucket, right? Some of us genetically have bigger buckets, but from utero throughout our life, our buckets fill. And I like to call them stress buckets, because the body doesn't know the difference of physical, chemical, or emotional stress. It just fills that bucket to one day the bucket overflows. And man, when that bucket overflows, that's when the symptoms start. What do? Some people chase it with medications. Some people chase it with natural things, but regardless, we're chasing symptoms. Ultimately, we have to empty the buckets. All right, and that's where cellular detox comes in, is you have to empty that bucket. And you can imagine if you had two glasses, right? One half full and one right to the edge. If I stress the one right to the edge just a little bit, it spills over very quickly. That's where so many people watching this are. Your bucket's so full. It's like you do this, you get emotionally stressed, you're spilling over, you get symptoms. You get physically stressed, you get symptoms. You exercise too much, you're fatigued. That's shaking the glass. Person half full, you can shake it a lot more, but you could obviously stress it enough to still create symptoms, but you have to shake it a lot more. Ultimately, you have to get your glass emptied. And that's the problem, is that people aren't really doing the right detox to do that, right? You're not going to empty that glass or bucket by doing colon cleanses. You're just not. Or saunas. And I'm a fan of saunas, but it's just one pathway. You have to upregulate the cell to have real detox. And again, these fillings, and I can talk about other hidden sources that so many people watching need to know this, but they do age you prematurely, right? I was, at one point, I was almost 10, I think 11 years. When you look at cellular age, you can actually measure it through telomere testing. Okay, that's like a biological clock. I don't want to get into too much of the science. There's other DNA methylations another way, but every possible way, I was way older. My cellular age was much older than my actual age. So now, through the things I teach, the detox obviously gave me my life back, but also a lot of the fasting strategies I teach. Now I'm younger at my cellular age, so, well, how does that happen? I mean, my skin is better. My hair is better. Every parameter I could visualize, I have no pain. I was younger in my 30s and all of these aging things were happening. And then when I tested myself, there it is. I was older. So ultimately, to reverse our aging process, slowing it down, we have to get rid of the things that are driving it. That's the conversation we're having. But then we can also do things to help, reverse it. Right? But that's the answer.
Got it. So let's go back to hormones for a minute, because you've mentioned that several times throughout this conversation. So what about just in general, as we age, what are some good ways to optimize our hormonal function?
Yeah. Well, we will talk about fasting in a minute. I think I titled this 2 biohacks that really reverse aging, but it's true. But I want people to understand this, and this is worth drawing, actually. When you draw, people actually learn. So we've got their attention back. So, okay. And I draw this because when you talk about these things, nobody wants a science lecture, but it gets people to understand, okay, this is a cell. Okay. And I started by saying you have to fix the cell to get well. And this is ultimately why you don't feel well. On every cell, there's receptors to hormones, to answer your question. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine these little antennas on every cell that your hormones, thyroid, I could put estrogen in here, I could put insulin in here, and I could put testosterone in there. These, it looks backwards to me, but anyway.
It looks good.
Okay, fine. All right, these hormones have to attach to these little antennas, these receptors,
Mm-hmm.
and then they get their message in the cell, and you feel good. All right, that's pretty simple, right? Problem I was having, the reason why my blood tests always look normal, is the hormone levels out here were in fact normal. But the problem is they weren't getting their message in the cell. The number one cause of this is toxins. So if I draw little X's here, so now, well, if my pen keeps not writing, so now we're going to switch pens. Okay, so if I draw little X's representing toxins, they drive inflammation. Why do toxins go to the outer cell? Because it's made of fat, and toxins are attracted to fat. But unfortunately, this is where your hormone antennas are, hormone receptors. So when the toxins land there, they blunt these hormone receptors via inflammation. And we've heard inflammation is the cause of all the diseases, but really it's cellular inflammation. So when that happens, I don't care how loud your thyroid hormone shouts, it can't get its message in the cell. Oh, and by the way, these little things called mitochondria in your cells, that's where you burn fat or sugar for energy and feel good. Oh, now it can't get its message into that. So now you're not burning fat normally. Oh, you get skinny fat like I did. I burned muscle, which lowered my metabolism, and I got fat on my belly, which I never had. So it was this. It was not connecting because of this, the toxins.
Got it.
So that's called hormone resistance. You know, we're familiar with insulin resistance, right? That's a type 2 diabetic. But this happens to estrogen, testosterone, any hormone. So ultimately, I could take thyroid hormone. It wouldn't, well, in the beginning, maybe because I'm shouting louder with the hormone, it would make me feel a little better. But ultimately, if I don't get rid of this, it doesn't matter what my hormone levels are, even if I raise them via taking hormones. You know, I have to get the message in the cell, and that's a toxic issue. So hormones are a big part of how you feel, but also how you age. Right now it's in vogue. Everyone's taking hormones to de-age or whatever it is. But the problem is this. Look, when we look at healthy people that live long, they don't have high hormone levels. Quite the opposite. They actually have very considered lower hormones. However, the cells can hear the hormones. They're very hormone sensitive. That's the key to health. So we've gotten into this thing, even in alternative medicine, of taking bioidentical hormones. Look, there's a time and a place to do that. I'm not arguing against taking all hormones, but I'm just saying this is the magic. So again, we have to fix the cell to get well, but we have to get these toxins off in and around the cell, and now we can hear the hormones.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So going back to detox again, and clearly that's right, a huge part of what you do. So let's talk about fasting. Like what is, I think titled today was Beyond Fasting. So, right, like what kind of fasting do you recommend? And also what we'll talk about within that also is autophagy. So what is that, and how do you get into that state?
Yeah. So, one of the things I teach my doctors I coach, when we put together the cellular detox and the cellular work and with these fasting strategies, and there's many that I teach that I talk about in my book, but one thing that you have to understand. So first of all, when I talk about a fast, there's daily fasting. Where literally you just don't eat for 15 hours and then you eat, a couple meals in maybe a 6-hour window. That's called intermittent fasting daily. Okay. So there's benefits to that. I do that, right? It's, it's not that late here, but I typically don't eat my first meal to maybe 3:00 in the afternoon. I'll eat one small meal, then I'll eat a big dinner. Okay. That's called intermittent fasting daily. And the word autophagy that you use means that during the fasting state, whether it's 15 hours, 24 hours, your body will burn bad cells. It will eat the bad cells to get energy. And the key is, and that's good because we want to get rid of bad cells, but we want to create new. So what the body does is it stimulates a stem cell to recreate a new cell that's not overreacting. If it's in a white blood cell, right, an immune cell, a lot of those are living too long and they're creating inflammation. So if we can get rid of those, and create a new one. Now we're creating a new immune system, right? So we want to tear down and rebuild. And that's the process of autophagy, which was a Japanese gentleman, 2016, Nobel Prize. He won it for understanding this autophagy process that happens in fasting states. Now, how can we take that to the next level? A lot of people are hearing about intermittent fasting, and I've done it for years, even before it was popular, because I actually visited an African tribe, and this was a hunting gathering tribe. I mean, they literally didn't have words for diseases we have. Like, there was no cancer. These people lived amazing, healthy lives. And they ate one meal about 3 in the afternoon, but it was a 3-hour meal. They kind of, very European way of eating as well, right? One meal, long meal, but they fasted through the day. Anyways, longer fast, 5 days, you can transform your hormonal health, your cellular health. I believe genetically we're programmed to go through times of fasting and famine. So another type of fast is called a partial fast, where we just reduce the calories under 1,000, depending on your body size. So if you're a smaller person, maybe 500 calories. If you're a bigger person, maybe 800 to 1,000. But we reduce calories for 5 days, and we reduce protein under 20 grams. That stimulates that autophagy process. Or you can just do a pure water fast, which really stimulates the autophagy. Why? Because the body needs energy and water, so it's going after those bad cells. And it's so smart that it only goes after the bad ones. It doesn't go after your good ones. That's what people have to understand. And then it stimulates new cells. So genetically programmed to fast. Our body resets our DNA. Bad genes that get turned on because our stress bucket's full. It resets those genes. It turns off bad genes and actually activates longevity genes like the SIRT1 and SIRT6 genes that help us live longer, healthy. So during times of fasting, we're programmed to fast to reset genes. It also resets our microbiome. So if you really want to understand how you fix a gut, my doctors would tell you, we don't fix a gut by just giving people bacteria. I wish it were so simple. But these periods of fasting is ultimately how we fix the gut. So the bottom line is reset your DNA, reset your gut, but it also gets rid of all these bad cells and creates new ones via stem cells. So it's literally a way of regenerating yourself. I think, excuse me, I interviewed Thomas Seyfried. He wrote the book Cancer is a Metabolic Disease. Brilliant guy. He believes one fast a year can decrease your cancer risk about 95%. And again, ancient cultures were forced in times of famine or fasting, environmental changes, running out of food, whatever it was, seasonal changes. But the fact is today we have food. We don't fast, but we are programmed to fast. And without it, new studies are showing we're creating disease. So one fast a year. I do 4. I do 2 partial and typically 2 water fasts. You get that autophagy, get rid of the bad, recreate new. Most people have hyperimmunity, allergic to foods, allergies, autoimmune. Your body's attacking itself. It's overreacting. One of the criticisms in the 90s when I first started studying extended fasting, and that's what we're talking about here, was that it lowers your immune system. But clinically, we'd answer that by saying, we don't see that. And the reason they would say that is because you see this massive drop in white blood cells during and even after a fast for a period of time. So they looked at that as low immunity. But what we would say clinically then in the 90s was, okay, that's true, but we see people's autoimmune shut down and these hyperimmune sensitivities to food shut down. And we see their good immune system get better. Well, today, studies show that we see that drop in white blood cells that they thought was low immunity. The body getting rid of they're called senescent cells, cells that live too long. White blood cells that are hyper responding, causing all those allergies and autoimmune. The body's eating those, and we see this drop in white blood cells. But what we didn't know is it's stimulating a stem cell and recreating younger, cells that aren't overreactive. So we're creating a new immune system. So the science gets that now today, that to recreate a new immune system, times of fasting are needed. But who's doing it? So that's why my book, Beyond Fasting, I talk about how to maximize your results, your autophagy in a fast. You don't just run a marathon, right? I mean, you would You might finish, but your results aren't going to be as good if you train, right? So I have a 7-week program of how to prepare for a fast. And then you can pick your fast, partial fast, water fast, to get this autophagy that we need to actually have good hormonal health period, and avoid disease.
Excellent. So, and everyone watching, there's a button below that links right over to Dr. Pompa's book if you want to check it out. So any more you can say about that? So you outlined 7 weeks so people can figure out what kind of fasting is going to work for them?
Yeah. In the program, really, it is working you up to how to do a fast. And then once you learn it, you're golden for life. Look, if you just add in one fast a year, your life will change. We can't duplicate. This is the oldest therapy known to man. Mm-hmm. Every religion on the planet disagrees about everything, even prayer, except one thing: fasting. It's remarkable how long it's been around. We are instinctively, animals, if they're injured or have sickness, they fast. But unfortunately, us humans, we need to be taught the process. You get the flu, you don't want to eat. The body will save its life via a fast, right? Mm-hmm. Even certain cancers, you just, won't eat. The body's trying to save its life. Something miraculous takes place in a fast. The body, it takes so much energy to process food. Just digesting it, but assimilating it in the gut, at the cellular level. When you take that time away from food, the body has all of this energy. It doesn't just sit on it. It starts to say, oh, I've been wanting to fix, this knee problem for how many years, but I just didn't have the time or the energy to do it. Now I do. So now all of a sudden you get this knee pain during the fast, like day 3, like what's going on there? Oh, I injured that 20 years ago. The body's going, I have extra energy now. I'm going to heal. I call that energy diversion. We see the body in a fasted state divert the energy to all these things that needed healed. And it's just so amazing to watch how, and then it uses these elevated stem cells. The reason we do 5 days is because we see this massive rise day 4 and day 5 of the stem cells, and they just start healing. The body starts using them to heal. I'm telling you, if you add one fast in a year, your life will transform. But so chapter 1 is becoming fat adapted first before you fast. And then I take you through my diet variation, feast famine cycles, which if you do before the fast, magic happens.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you. I love that. And everyone, please go check that out. If you're not already fasting, obviously this is a great way to get yourself started. And if you already are, I just the more education, the better to how to do this. So are there any last insights? Anything? We've talked about many things. Anything else you feel like we've left out before we wrap up?
This is an important one.
Okay.
I think when we talk about diet, we have people line up in their camps, right?
Yes, they
Vegan,
do.
plant-based, vegetarian, paleo, keto, carnivore. I believe that when we study ancient cultures, they were in and out of every one of those diets for different reasons that I mentioned. So that should tell us something. So there's benefit to every one of those diets. But what science really shows, and I talk about this in a chapter of my book, is that changing diet or diets is the real magic. So I call it diet variation, and I dedicate 2 chapters to it, because there's seasonal variation when you change your diet. There's monthly and there's weekly. So I'm going to give you a tip weekly and monthly on what everyone listening can do right now. But seasonal changes are typically what we're forced into when we can't go to Whole Foods or somewhere and just eat the same 8 foods we always eat, right? So no matter where you lived on the earth, you were forced into changing your diet, which again, studies show every time you change your diet, it's like changing an exercise program. You start getting results again. So when you went paleo, I got results. So people hang on to that diet, right? Or the vegan diet, you felt better. Of course you did, but it wasn't the diet that was the magic. It was the actual change. It creates this hormone optimization to adapt to the change. Oh, and our microbiome changes when we change our diet. So huge things happen. All right. One of the things that we hear, should women intermittent fast or do low carb diets? It's not good for women, especially perimenopause, thyroid conditions, adrenal conditions. Well, they're missing a really important point that ancient cultures did that modern people don't do, and that's diet variation. So what we found is if you're someone who's really strict on a diet and all of a sudden you just stop losing weight. Your diet's not working for you. If every once in a while we throw in a high carbohydrate, healthy carbs day a week, one day, it reminds your body it's not starving and it starts burning fat again. Or we've learned this monthly. If we take 5 days a month, and ladies, listen, this is important. If you look at the week before your cycle, you go, yeah, I seem to just really ruin my diet around then. I have all these cravings. Maybe your innate intelligence is telling you something. When we look at all the hormone conversions that are happening at that time as your body prepares for its cycle, well, you need insulin to make so many of those conversions. And when you're really strict on your diet, what happens is you're lowering your insulin. So the body gives you carbohydrate cravings to raise insulin because it raises glucose, raises insulin. And now your body starts to hormonally make better conversions. And so you do higher healthy carbs 5 days before your cycle, your period, and then it transforms you hormonally the rest of the month. And then you can go back to the diet. So high carb 1 day a week, high carb 5 days a week or 5 days a month can be hormonally transformational because of this principle. When I explain why it works, in the book and how to implement it with my 5-1-1 rule, 4-2-1, those are different variation strategies. But I'll just leave you with this. It works. It transforms your hormones. We need feast and famine. The feasts are as important as the famine. So I teach how to do that weekly. Feast, famine, feast, famine. I interviewed Karen Verde. She's a scientist, where she looked at low-fat diets, high-fat, low carb. I mean, you name it. They compared the diets. And what won out the most was a diet of feast, famine. So they literally took and they did standard American diet and then 500 calorie day. Standard American diet the next day 500 calories. It beat out everything. And I said, why do you think that is? She says, when you create that forced adaptation, the body has to adapt. And how does it adapt? It adapts by getting your cells more sensitive to the hormones. It creates a hormone optimization to adapt to that dietary change. So whether we do it weekly, monthly, or seasonally, the principles are there in the science. But we can just study ancient cultures and realize they were forced to change their diet. But we know it creates this hormone optimization, and I have all those strategies. So little tip.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that. I love your passion for this. And I think you just wrapped it up so nicely with all of what we just talked about. So thank you for doing this and all the work that you do in the world, Dr. Pompa. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. And everyone tuning in or watching or listening right now, thank you so much for showing up for yourself, and we'll see you again real soon. Take care.